The Lost World by author Conan Doyle. Chapter 1. Try Your Luck with Professor Challenger. How beautiful Gladys was! I loved her, but we were only friends. That day, I decided that the time had come. Would she say yes or no to me? When we were in her sitting room near the warm fire in her house, she looked at me with her beautiful dark eyes, and she said, "I think you are going to ask me to be your wife, Ned. Don't do it." "But why can't you love me, Gladys? Is it my face, my figure, or what?" "No, it isn't that," she said at last. "I'm in love with somebody else. It's nobody, only an ideal." "What is your ideal?" "Oh, he's much like you. Well, he's a strong man, a man who can look death in the face." "We can't all be great heroes," said I. "Besides, I have never had the chance, but I'll try to take it." "You know, chances are all around you." "Give me a chance. I'll do something in the world, and if I do, not another word, sir. Some day you will win your place in the world. Then we shall talk it over again." I left her with my heart full of love. I wanted to find some heroic deed. When I came to my work, I worked at the Daily Gazette as a reporter. I asked Mr. McCardle, my boss, to send me to any dangerous place. I wanted it to be the most difficult one. "Dear Mr. Malone, I'm afraid the time has gone. There is no place for romance anywhere. But wait a little bit," he said with a smile on his face. "What about a modern Munchausen? I'm talking about Professor Challenger. Some people say he's a liar. You can have a chance to find out." "Challenger?" I cried. "Professor Challenger, the famous zoologist? But I don't understand why I must interview this gentleman. What has he done?" "He went to South America on expedition 2 years ago and came back last year. Then he began to talk about his adventures, but he didn't tell everything. He didn't tell in detail. Something wonderful happened, or the man is a champion liar. He has only got some bad photos. He gets so aggressive that he attacks anyone who asks questions. He often sends reporters down the stairs. That's your man, Mr. Malone. Now, off you go, and good luck." I left the office and went to have a drink in the cafe. There I met my friend, Tarp Henry, a microbiologist. He was surprised. "Challenger? The man who came with some silly stories from South America? As far as I can remember, he told about some strange animals. He gave an interview and there was such a scandal. Now nobody believes him." "Why?" "Well, it's his impossible character. Besides, I have heard something of Challenger. They say he is a man nobody can ignore." "What do you mean?" "Would you like to come to my office? I've got something interesting to tell you." Half an hour later, I was in his office with a thick book in front of me. It was the professor's lecture, written for a scientific conference. I couldn't understand a word, but it was clear that the professor spoke to the audience in an unfriendly way. Then I had an idea to write a letter to the professor and send it with my friend's address on it. When the letter was finished, I read it to Tarp. The letter said that a poor student of nature, that was me, asked for an interview with the professor. He wanted to discuss some new scientific problems. Well, not bad, really. But what are you going to do then? Asked Tarp. To get there? When I'm in his room. When you are in his room, you need a gun or something like that to save your life. Remember, he's a dangerous character. Everyone hates him. On Wednesday, I found a letter waiting for me. I took a taxi, and in 20 minutes I was in front of a nice big house. An old servant opened the door, and I came into the house. In the corridor, I met a small, bright woman with dark Italian eyes. "One moment," she said. "May I ask a question? Have you met my husband before?" "No, madam." "Then I must tell you that he is an impossible person. Get quickly out of the room if he gets aggressive. I hope you are not going to speak about his expedition to South America." I could not lie to a lady. "Oh dear, it's very dangerous. You won't believe a word he says, I'm sure. But don't tell him so, because it makes him very angry. Remember, he believes it himself. If you find him dangerous, really dangerous, ring the bell." With these words, the lady left me, and the servant led me to Professor's study. He was sitting at a large table, covered with books, maps, and diagrams. His head was very big. He had large black-blue beard, and his eyes were blue-gray, under great black eyebrows, very clear and very critical. Besides, I noticed 2 big hands covered with long black hair. "Well," he said in a roaring voice, "what now?" "Thank you for the chance to meet you, sir," I said quietly. "Ah, you are the young person who agrees with my ideas. What is more, you've got something of great interest to tell me. That is a great help to me, isn't it? So, what would you like to tell me?" "I'm a poor student," I said with a silly smile. "At the same time, I think that you were a little unfriendly to some other scientists." "Unfriendly? Well, I think you know," he said, "that the cranial index is a constant factor." "Naturally," said I. "And that telegony is still sub judice?" "Certainly, sir." "And that the germ plasma is different from the parthenogenetic egg? That the cranial index is a constant factor?" "Why, surely!" I cried. "But what does that prove?" he asked in a gentle voice. What indeed?" I murmured. "What does it prove?" "Shall I tell you?" he said in a low voice. "If you please, sir." "It proves," he roared with a sudden anger, "that you are the journalist who has no more science in his head than he has truth in his reports." He jumped to his feet. "Nonsense!" he cried. "That's what I told you, sir. Scientific nonsense. Did you think you could play a trick on me? You played a dangerous game, and I think that you have lost it." "Look here, sir," I said. "You can be as angry as you like, but you will not attack me." "Will I not?" He was slowly coming to me. "I have thrown some journalists out of the house. You will be the 4th. Get out of here." "Don't be such a fool, Professor," I cried. That moment he jumped at me. The door was opened, and I was lucky not to go through it. We went to the front steps. "Enough?" he asked when we went outside. We shouted at each other and used the worst words we knew. Soon a policeman came to us. "What's all this?" asked the policeman. "This man attacked me," said I. "Did you attack him?" The professor said nothing. "It's not the first time," said the policeman. "You were in trouble last month for the same thing. Do you give him in charge, sir?" "No," said I do not, because he gave me a warning." The policeman closed his notebook and with the words of goodbye left. The professor looked at me, and there was something humorous in his eyes. "Come in," said he. "I'm not done with you yet." Chapter 2. It's just the very biggest thing in the world. "Now, Mr. Malone," he continued, "you are at my house. Your answer to the policeman was a surprise to me. It was so unnatural to a person of your profession. I really felt some good feeling on you. So I decided to continue our talk." He turned away and started looking for something among papers on his desk. Then I saw a very old sketchbook in his hand. "Now I'm going to tell you what happened to me in South America," said he. "You must stay quiet and listen carefully. And remember, it is our private talk. Is that clear?" "I can see it, and I have no choice." "Well, you know that 2 years ago I visited South America. The banks of the Amazon are unknown land, and I had to explore them and examine its fauna. On my way back, I spent a night at a small Indian village. The native people were Cucama Indians, very friendly indeed. They were really glad to see me back, because I had helped some ill natives successfully. They explained to me that somebody needed my help. I followed the chief to one of his houses. When I came in, I found that the poor man was dead. It surprised me a lot that he was a white man, not an Indian. Some days ago he came to their village. He was dying of hunger. The man's bag was near him, and I examined it. His name was written on it, Maple White, Lakeview, Detroit. The man was an artist. There were some pictures, a paint box, a box of colored chalks, some brushes, that big bone which you can see on my desk, and a gun. Suddenly, I saw something in his pocket. It was this sketchbook. I give it to you, and I ask you to examine it carefully." I opened the book. On the first page, there was a picture of a very fat man in a green jacket. Then small sketches of Indians and animals followed. I looked at Professor in surprise. "Try the next page," said he. It was a full-page sketch. I could see high hills covered with light green trees. Above the hills, there were dark red cliffs. They looked like an unbroken wall. Near the cliffs, there was a pyramidal rock. There was a great tree in its top. Above it all, a blue tropical sky. "It looks nice," I said, "but I can't say it is wonderful." "Wonderful!" he cried. "Nobody on the earth has ever seen such a place. Now the next." I turned the page and gave a cry of surprise. There was a full-page picture of the most extraordinary creature. It was a wild dream. The head was like that of a bird, the body that of a large lizard. The tail was covered with sharp spikes. In front of this creature there was a little man who stood looking at it. "Well, what do you think of that?" cried the professor. "It's monstrous. But why did the artist draw such an animal?" "Alcohol, I think." "Ah, any more ideas?" "Well, sir, what do you think of it?" "The creature exists. The artist saw it with his own eyes." "It is so difficult to agree with you, but I think you are right," I said. I remembered our fight quite well. However, this little man puzzles me. "Look here," he cried, and pointed at the picture with a great hairy finger. "You see that plant behind the animal? It's not a small flower. It's a huge palm tree. Don't you see that the artist sketched the man to give a scale?" "Oh dear!" I cried. "Then you think the monster was real?" I turned over the pages, but there was nothing more in the book. "But we have got only one sketch by an American artist, and he is dead now. It proves nothing, does it?" For an answer, the professor took a book from a shelf. "There is a picture of great interest in this book. Ah, yes, here it is. Can you see the words 'the Jurassic dinosaur Stegosaurus'? His leg is twice as tall as a man. Well, what do you think of that?" He gave me the book. The animal looked very much like the monster from the sketchbook. Maybe the American saw the same picture and carried it in his memory. Later it appeared to him when he was ill. "Very good," said the professor. "I will now ask you to look at this bone." He showed me the bone from the dead man's bag. It was about 6 inches long and thicker than my finger. "Whose bone is it?" asked the professor. I looked at it carefully. "You don't need to be ashamed, young man. I think there is no zoologist who could name it." The professor showed me a very little bone. "Look, this human bone looks the same, but it is much smaller. Does it give you any idea of the size of the creature?" "An elephant?" Don't talk of elephants in South America. Believe me, this is not a bone of a tapir or of any other living creature. It belongs to a very large, a very strong animal. You don't believe it, do you?" "I'm just very interested." Let's go on with my story. You see, I couldn't leave that land without getting an answer. I knew where the American came from. In Indian legends, I found some stories of a strange land. You have heard of Kuripuri? It's a terrible creature from the woods. Nobody can describe it, but it means terror along the Amazon. Now, all natives name the same place where Kuripuri lives. It was the same place from which the American came. I had to find out what it was. What did you do? First, the natives didn't want to talk to me about that strange land. But with the help of presents, I got 2 natives to help me. After many adventures, we came to an unknown land. Would you look at this? He gave me a photograph. It's not good, because on our way back the boat was turned. This is the only photo I have got now. The photo was very bad and off-colored. I could hardly see anything in it. It was a dull gray landscape with a long and high wall of cliffs. I believe it is the same place as the picture from the sketchbook, I said. It is the same place, the professor answered. Now, look here. The next photo was very bad, too. I could see a thin, tall rock with a tall tree on its top. It was like the picture from the sketchbook. Now, will you please look at the rock more carefully? Do you see anything there on the tree? A large bird with a very big beak. Is it a pelican? It is not a pelican. It's not a bird. You know, I shot that creature. You have it then? I had it. It was lost when our boat turned over, but I have got the part of its wing. Have a look. It looked like the wing of a large bat with a membrane. A monstrous bat, I cried. Nothing of the sort, said the professor. The bats have 3 very long fingers with membranes between. Now there is only one membrane here, so it cannot be a bat. But what is it? I really don't know, said I. Here, he said and pointed to the picture of a flying monster, is a nice picture of the pterodactyl, a flying reptile of the Jurassic period. Compare it with the picture in your hand. The sketch, the photographs, the story, and now the bone. It's just the very biggest thing that I ever heard of, cried I. You are a Columbus of science who has discovered a lost world. And then, sir, what did you do next? It was the wet season, Mr. Malone, and I couldn't stay there longer. I explored some low parts of this cliff, but I couldn't find any way up. But I climbed the pyramidal rock. From its top, I had a better idea of the plateau. It was very large. I saw no end of it. Below, it is a jungly region full of snakes and insects. Did you see any other living creatures? No, sir, I did not. But at night we heard some very strange noises. But the creature that the American drew, how do you explain it? We decided that he climbed the pyramidal rock and watched it from there. I'm sure that it must be a very difficult way up. That's why we can't see the monsters walking round the country. But how did they come up there? I'll try to explain it to you. South America is a granite continent. In this place, long time ago, there was a great sudden volcanic upheaval. A large territory went up with all living creatures. What is the result? The laws of nature stopped working. Those creatures still live there. You are absolutely right. Did you tell about your discovery to the scientists? I did, said the professor, and their stupidity shocked me. I am not going to prove anything. When men like you came to me, I couldn't meet them with a smile. I'm afraid you have noticed it. He smiled and continued. You know, tonight I'm going to try again. Mr. Waldron, a naturalist, will lecture at the Zoological Institute. They invited me to say some words of thanks to him. I hope I'll be able to give a few ideas. Maybe they would like to discuss them. When I left Professor Challenger, I believed all his words. Besides, I knew I could make a sensational report for my newspaper. When I arrived at the Institute, I could see a lot of people in the Great Hall. They were white-bearded professors, medical students, and just ordinary people among them. It was rather noisy there, but what a roar of welcome broke when Professor Challenger appeared. Then Mr. Waldron, the famous lecturer, came onto the platform, and the meeting began. That evening, he spoke about the creation of the earth. He told us of the earth in its early days, a huge mass of hot gas high up the skies. Then he spoke of the cooling of our planet, the formation of the mountains and oceans. He told us of the mysterious origin of life. Did it appear from the elements of the planet? Did it arrive from outside? Even the best scientists knew nothing. Then the lecturer told of animal life. He started with mollusks, other primitive sea creatures, and fishes. He pictured the dramatic past, the drying of the seas, the lagoons full of sea animals, the first sea creatures coming out from the sea. That was the time, ladies and gentlemen, when a frightening family of monstrous reptiles came to life. But they fortunately became extinct long before the first people. "Question!" came a voice from the platform. It surprised Mr. Waldron, and he stopped his lecture for a moment, and then repeated slowly the words, "which became extinct before the coming of man." "Question!" he heard the voice again. Waldron looked along the line of professors on the platform until he saw Professor Challenger. "I see," said Waldron with a smile. "It is my friend, Professor Challenger." And he went on and on. But when he spoke about extinct creatures, the audience heard the angry voice of the professor. "I must ask you to stop that," said the lecturer, and the hall got absolutely quiet. Challenger stood up slowly. "I must ask you, Mr. Waldron," the professor said, "to stop saying what is against the facts. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all I must thank Mr. Waldron for an interesting lecture, which we have just listened. But there are some ideas against the facts. He thinks some types of animals became extinct. Mr. Waldron is very wrong, because he has never seen a prehistoric animal. They are not extinct. How do I know, you ask me? I know because I have visited their secret home. I know because I have seen some of them. Am I a liar? Did I hear someone say that I was a liar?" Then the time of chaos came. The professor cried, "Well, you disagree with me. Will you choose one or more of you to go out and test my words? Would Mr. Summerlee take part in it?" Mr. Summerlee, an old and famous professor of zoology, agreed. I saw it was the right moment to take my chance. Suddenly, I saw a tall, thin man with dark red hair. He looked back at me with hard, angry eyes. "I'll go, Mr. Chairman," I said. "My name is Edward Dunn Malone. I am the reporter of the Daily Gazette." "What is your name, sir?" the chairman asked the man with dark red hair. "I'm Lord John Roxton. I have spent some years on the banks of the Amazon." "Lord John Roxton is a world-famous traveler," said the chairman. "At the same time, we would like to have a member of the press upon such an expedition." "Then I can see," said Professor Challenger, "that these three gentlemen will start the expedition to test my words." That was the end of the meeting, and in a few minutes I left the hall. I was walking under the silvery lights of Regent Street, full of thoughts of Gladys and of my future, when suddenly somebody touched my shoulder. I turned and saw the tall, thin man, my companion on this strange expedition. "Mr. Malone," said he, "now we are companions. Perhaps you will visit me. There are one or two things that I'd like to discuss with you." When I came into his house, I saw rich furs and strange carpets on the floor, expensive old and modern pictures, the heads of animals from every part of the world on the walls. Lord John Roxton was one of the greatest travelers of his day. He sat opposite me and looked at me with his eyes of a cold light blue, the color of a mountain lake. "By the way," he said, "what do you know of this Professor Challenger?" "I never saw him till today." "Well, neither did I. It's funny that we will follow the orders from a man we don't know. He seemed an old bird. His brothers of science don't like him. What is your interest in the expedition?" I told him what had happened in the morning at the professor's house. Roxton listened very carefully. Then he drew out a map of South America and put it on the table. "I believe every word he said to you," said he. "South America is the greatest, richest, most wonderful land on this planet. People don't know it yet. I've been up and down it. Well, I heard some Indian legends. Anything is possible in that country. There are some narrow waterways along which people travel. Outside that, it is all darkness. As the professor said tonight, there are 50,000 miles of waterway running through a forest, and that forest is as big as Europe. Why shouldn't something new and wonderful hide in such a country? And why shouldn't we find it out? Besides, there is a risk in every mile of it. We are all getting too soft nowadays. Give me the great land, with a gun in my hand, and something to look for, and I'll be the happiest man in the world. We had a long talk at his place, but I had to leave for work. When I came to the newspaper office, McCardle was waiting for me. We agreed that I should write at home full reports of my adventures. Chapter 3. We disappear into the unknown. It was a wet, foggy morning in the late spring. 3 people were walking to the big ship. Professor Summerlee walked slowly. He was already very sorry for himself. Lord John Roxton walked bravely. His thin face looked really happy. As for me, I hoped I looked happy too. Suddenly, there was a loud cry behind us. It was Professor Challenger. He ran after us, red-faced and very angry. "I have some words to tell you," he said. "Here is a letter. You will open it in the town Manaus, but not until the date and the hour written on it. Is that clear? Mr. Malone, I am not against your reports, but I tell you to give no detail. You mustn't publish anything until you return. Goodbye." We crossed the Atlantic without any problem. Then we started our way up the Amazon, a wide, slow river. At the town of Manaus, we stayed at a hotel until the day marked on the letter. Before I reach the surprising events of that date, I would like to say some words about my companions. Professor Summerlee is a well-known scientist. He is tall and thin, but he is never tired. He took part in some scientific expeditions, and the life of the camp and the canoe is not new to him. He is 66, but he is as strong as I am. In character, he is always skeptical. From the beginning of our expedition, he never stopped saying that Professor Challenger is an absolute liar. But when we landed from the ship, he forgot about Professor Challenger. He spends all days exploring the insect and bird world around. He is absolutely devoted to science. Lord John Roxton always dresses very carefully and shaves at least once a day. Like most men of action, he is short in speech, but he is always quick to answer a question or join a conversation. He talks in a quick and humorous way. His knowledge of South America is great. He believes Professor Challenger absolutely. He spoke little of his visits to Brazil and Peru, so I was very surprised that natives knew and loved him. They even told legends about him. Lord John Roxton was a South American maniac. He could not speak of that great country without great love, and this love was infectious. "What is there?" he cried, pointing to the north. "Wood and swamps and jungle? Who knows what is over there? No white man has ever been there. The unknown is on every side. Who will say what is possible in such a country? Why should Challenger not be right?" So, that's enough about my 2 white companions. Now I'm going to tell you about the others. The first is a gigantic Negro named Sambo. He's a black Hercules, as strong as a horse, and about as intelligent. At the town of Para, 2 natives, Gomez and Manuel, joined us. They looked like 2 panthers, active and frightening. Both of them spent their lives in those places which we were going to explore. At last, After a week, the day had come and the hour. We were sitting round the table with a letter on it. Lord John put his watch on the table. "We have 7 more minutes," he said. "Let's open it now," said Summerlee. "Oh, come, there must be rules in every game," said Lord John. "It's Old Man Challenger's show." "I don't know what is inside this letter. If there is nothing important, I would catch the first ship and go back to England. I wouldn't like to follow the instructions of a London lunatic. Now, Roxton, it is time." Lord John opened the letter and took out a paper. It was as white as snow. Not a word on it. We looked at each other, and Professor Summerlee went laughing. "So," he cried, "he is a liar. We are returning home. Then we will report him as a champion liar." "May I come in?" came a voice from the door. That voice! Professor Challenger in a round boyish hat. Challenger, with his hands in his pockets, came into the room. "I'm sorry I'm some minutes late," said he, looking at his watch. "But I was sure you would never open it. I wanted to join you before the hour. Professor Summerlee, have you got a chance to laugh at me?" Professor Challenger shook hands with me and Lord John, said hello to Professor Summerlee, and sat into an armchair. "As to the small trick which I played on you, from the very beginning I decided to join you. I didn't tell you about it because I didn't want to travel with you, but from now on you are in safe hands. I'll be your guide. Get ready. We make an early start in the morning." So we did. For 3 days we sailed up the Amazon. It was so wide that from its center we couldn't see its banks. On the 4th day we turned into a smaller river. After 2 days' voyage we came to an Indian village. Then the professor sent back our ship, because there were rapids ahead. He also told us that we were coming to the door of the unknown country. The very next day we made our start on 2 canoes. For 2 days we made our way up a river, dark in color but very clear. We could see the river bottom. Twice we came across rapids and had to carry our luggage. How shall I ever forget its mystery? The trees were the highest. They looked like Gothic cathedrals. Their branches foamed the green roof. Sometimes golden sunshine went downwards among the darkness. We walked quietly on the thick, soft carpet of fallen leaves. We felt important, as we feel in Westminster Abbey. The effect was as a dream of fairyland. In these great woods, the dark means death, and every plant makes its way up. Everything tries to get sunshine. Climbing plants are monstrous, but the others learn the art of climbing too. The animal life was rather poor, but above our heads there was a world of snake and monkey and bird. They lived in the sunshine and looked down in wonder at our little dark figures. Early in the morning and in the evening, the monkeys and parrots cried together, but during the hot hours of the day, only the buzz of insects filled our ears. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we came to a very dangerous rapid. It was the place where the canoe of Professor Challenger turned over. Then we went more than 10 miles. Suddenly Professor Challenger showed us a tree on the opposite bank of the river. "What do you think of that?" he asked. "It's a palm," said Summerlee. "You are right, but it's not just a palm, it's my landmark. There is a secret opening on the other side of the river. There is no break in the trees. That is the wonder and the mystery of it. This is my private gate into the unknown." It was indeed a wonderful place. We went through that gate. We found ourselves in a small quiet river running over a sandy bottom. The thick branches met over our heads, and through this tunnel in a golden light flowed the green shiny river. It was as clear as crystal. It went under its leafy archway. It was an avenue to a land of wonders. Now we could see animals more often. We met hundreds of little black monkeys with snow-white teeth and smiling eyes. Once, a dark funny tapir looked at us from the bushes. Then he ran away through the forest. Once, the yellow puma appeared among the trees, and its green, hateful eyes quickly looked at us. There were thousands of birds, blue, red, and white. They were sitting on every branch along the river. For 3 days we went through the tunnel of green sunshine. The deep peace of this strange waterway was fantastic. On the 3rd day, the river became so small that we couldn't go on our journey in the canoes. We drew the canoes up and hid them among the bushes. Then we packed our food and started on our way on foot. Soon the small river disappeared in a great green swamp. Clouds of mosquitoes filled the air around, but we went on walking. On the 2nd day after leaving our canoes, we found that the country had changed. Our road was all way up, and the woods became thinner and lost their tropical beauty. The tall trees of the Amazonian forest gave place to the cocoa palms. On the 9th day, the trees became even smaller. The bamboo was so thick that we had to cut our way through it. It was very tiring and monotonous. Even at the most open places, I could only see the back of Lord John's cotton jacket in front of me. Yellow walls of bamboos were on either side. I don't know what kind of creatures lived there. Sometimes we heard large, heavy animals near us. Just as night fell, we went out of bamboos and formed our camp. Early next morning, we found that the character of the country had changed again. Tree ferns were growing everywhere. Suddenly, Professor Challenger stopped and pointed to the right. And at the distance of a mile we saw something. It looked like a great gray bird. It was flying very low. Then it disappeared among the tree ferns. "Did you see it?" cried Challenger. "Summerlee, did you see it?" "What it was?" he asked. "A pterodactyl." Summerlee laughed. "It was a stork." Challenger was too angry to speak. Lord John came to me and said, "I'm not sure, but it wasn't a bird." Next day we came into a place covered with palm trees, and then we could see the line of high red cliffs. There it lies in front of my eyes. There can be no question that it is the same. Challenger looks proud, and Summerlee is silent, but still skeptical.